Hello and welcome everyone to our first video about using Unity for game development. This first video is pretty basic. We're going to walk through how to create a project. We're going to look at how Unity stores its files and what a Unity project consists of. We're also going to take our first look at the Unity editor and some of the different windows that we're going to be familiar with. For those of you who have had intro to computer programming or some programming experience, you're probably going to find this editor to be a lot more confusing than the editors that we've used in class or simple programming editors that you may have used. And the reason for that is because the Unity project has a lot more going on in it. We are sort of mirroring or marrying graphics and programming and art and all kinds of crazy stuff. So we'll take a look at how the editor is different in just a moment. For those of you that have worked with a 3D art and animation application like Blender, if you've taken the 3D art and animation course or seen my videos, this looks a lot more like that. So this is the default window that I get after opening Unity for the first time, and I have no projects yet. So we're going to go ahead and make a new project. Now I am actually going to make a new folder here. And we're going to talk about accounts and stuff in class. We're not too worried about that right now. But I do want to have a folder to hold all of my projects. So I'm going to create a new folder, call it Unity Projects, open that up. And then I am going to call this new Unity project my first game. And right now we have these things called asset packages. There's some options that Unity tries to prompt us with. We're not going to worry about those for now. We will be using packages and pre-made stuff once we start the course to save us time. But for right now, let's just create a basic 3D project. And this may take a bit. Unity tends to be a little slow. Okay, and here is Unity. Now we are specifically using Unity 5. You can see up here we're using Unity version 5.5. If for whatever reason you guys are following along on your computer at home or you download Unity at home, you want to make sure that you're using 5 or above. There are a lot of significant changes between version 4 and version 5, so make sure you get the latest release because that's what we're going to be dealing with here. Okay. So let's take a look at what we're seeing in our Unity editor. I'm going to go ahead and open up Sticky Notes. And we are going to get rid of all of these 3D art animation stickies that I had for my other videos. And we're going to start fresh. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Unity editor. The Unity editor consists of 4 major windows, and those 4 major windows allow us to interact with our game. The first thing that you're seeing here, this big window that grabs your attention in the middle, is what we call the scene, or the scene view. And the scene is our game world. This is where all the things belong that we put into our game. And it also shows us a preview of what it is that our game is going to look like. And if you see in here, this is all 3-dimensional space. If any of you guys took 3D art and animation, this looks a lot like our 3D view in Blender. So we're going to be working mostly in this space, and this space allows us to add game objects to our scene, which we're going to talk more about later, and interact with those game objects in such a way that we create a game. Now there's some services over here on the right. We're going to ignore these for now. And I'm going to highlight what's called the inspector. So typically we have our scene view in the middle, represents our game world and our objects. Over on the left, we have our hierarchy, or sometimes called our outliner, which shows us, it lists all the objects in our game. So this is our hierarchy. Right now, we have 2 objects in our scene. We have a camera which shows us the perspective that the user is going to be seeing the game from. And we have a lamp that gives us light. And if we click the camera, you can see right here, if we were to preview our game right now, this is what the user would see. What's going on in the camera view right here. Light obviously provides light in our scene. Without that light, we wouldn't have any scene at all. It would be completely dark. We couldn't see anything. So this outliner becomes very handy because as we add new objects to the scene, they're going to pop up here. And we're going to talk about hierarchy management and how we put objects inside of objects later on. And then finally, we have a assets or a project explorer right down here. So underneath the hierarchy, we have a project explorer, and this lists all files in our project. And in general, for the most part, we're going to break Blender down into, I keep saying Blender, we're going to break Unity down, excuse me, into 3 different types of files. We're going to have pre-made assets that we're going to make available to ourselves. So if we say lists files, and then list all files in our projects, things like assets, which are pre-made, scripts, and game objects. These 2 guys are going to be really, really important for us later on. Game objects represent the things in our scene, the things that we can mess around with in our game, and scripts are our actual code. So scripts are snippets of executable code that allow us to add behavior to our game. So the game objects are the things, and the scripts are the actions or the verbs. You can kind of think of nouns and verbs, the big difference between game objects and scripts. We're going to be importing a lot of assets in Unity because there's a lot of pre-made stuff out there that's going to allow us to get games working even faster. And we'll talk about that next time as well in the next video. So in this assets folder, the first thing that we are actually going to do is, for now, I want to create some folders. So if I go in here and I say create folder, I'm going to have one folder called scripts. And we're just going to leave that there for now. We're going to make more folders as we create more stuff for our game. But for right now, we're going to have a scripts folder to keep track of any scripts that we make. And the rest of this we're going to leave as is for now. We're going to be dragging a lot more stuff in this Project Explorer once we start pulling in some assets. So we've got our scene, we've got our hierarchy, we've got our Project Explorer. Last but not least, we have what's called the inspector, or the inspector window, or the inspector view. And the inspector window gives us details about the selected object or script. And I'm going to give you guys an example. If I click on this camera, and we don't have to worry about what all these things mean right now, but when I click on this camera, the inspector highlights a bunch of details that have to do with the camera. A bunch of confusing stuff that doesn't make sense, like skybox and culling mask and perspective projection and field of view and clipping panes. Stuff we don't care about right now, but stuff that will become slowly over the course of this class, stuff that will become very, very useful to us. The first thing that I want to highlight, because it's the only thing in the scene view we haven't talked about, notice how position, rotation, and scale, everything underneath this transform tab, is divided into 3 coordinates, x, y, and z. And if we look in our 3D or our scene view, we can see X, Y, and Z markers. For those of you that have had 3D art and animation, this is already going to sound very familiar, but in 3-dimensional space, we use X, Y, and Z as our axes. So in this case, in Unity, X is left and right, Y is up and down, and Z is forwards and backwards. So we have to account for that 3rd dimension. In a 2-dimensional game, we would just have X and Y, right? Left, right, up, down. But we have to account for 3 dimensions in Unity. So those are the 4 basic windows, that you're going to see when we open the Blender interface. The only other one that I want to highlight and it sort of goes along with the scene view. I'm going to add the word view here. Is our game view. And this is a preview of the game from the user's perspective. User's perspective. And you can see that that is represented by this little tab up here. So we have the scene where I can change everything I want, edit, but this is not what the user sees. What the user sees is this. Here is our game view. So if we were to run or play this game, this is what we would find. Not very exciting right now, but very quickly we're going to get into adding objects and figuring out all that fun stuff. Okay, so I've discussed the three things that we have in our game: asset, script, game objects. We've talked about the views. Let's talk a little bit about project management. So there's a couple of different ways that we can manage projects on Unity. The easiest way is to save our project and keep everything local and work on one machine, and that's great. One thing that we may look at in this class is over here we have a little cloud button, which has some services, but we can put our project on the cloud if we want to. I'm not sure how much space we get, so we may not be able to put all of our projects on the cloud, but using the cloud is one way to get our projects saved in a space where we can use it whenever. However, when you're turning in projects, it's going to look a lot like Intro to Computer Programming. Here is my first game. And if we go inside my first game, you guys are going to find, as you move on and become better programmers, editors love to create folders. So Unity, whenever I create a project, creates a bunch of folders for me. It creates an assets folder, a library folder, project settings, temp, and then something called myfirstgame.sln. All of this stuff is stuff that is relevant to the game. And to be able to work on this stuff outside our own computer, we need to be able to take this entire project and move it somewhere. So just like in computer programming, whenever you guys submit something, I want you to save it, and then I want you to find your folder, and we are going to compress the entire folder. So on Mac, you guys would right-click and then click compress. On Windows, I'm going to right-click, send to compressed folder. Oh, goodness. Okay. Hold on. Let's close this. Try again. There we go. So we got to make sure we have Unity closed, because Unity thinks that we're trying to take its files away while the editor's open, and that's bad news. So we save, we close Unity, we zip up our game, and then this is what we would submit. So the only other problem we may run into as we move on, I haven't even added anything, and without adding anything, this game is 879 kilobytes. So we're probably going to hit the download limit, or the upload limit on eBackpack pretty quickly. If that happens, I'm going to have to create a separate space for you guys to upload your projects, and we will cross that bridge when we come to it. But that's everything that we need to cover for our first video. We know how to make a new project, scene, our game view, our hierarchy that lists all the objects, our project explorer where we're going to be placing different types of files, the most important being scripts and game objects, which we'll dive more into in the next video. And then we have our inspector window that tells us everything about a particular object or script. Oh, and we also know that 3D space is measured, or represented, I should say, represented with X, Y, and Z axes. Okay, so that gives us our first quick look at Unity. I know that we didn't create a lot in this first video, but we're going to have some setup work that we need to get done first, and the next video is all going to be about adding our first objects and making sure that we can interact with things like the hierarchy and the inspector window and use them to their full potential. Thanks for watching.